Good morning everybody and welcome to Marine in the Moment. This is one of our National Marine Week videos and today we are at Brightlingsea Marina with this rather lovely backdrop and we're going to be talking about oysters today. I am Alex Smith, I'm the Marine and Coastal Engagement Officer for the Essex Wildlife Trust and we're joined by
Matt Uttley from the Blue Marine Foundation.
And today we're talking about our Essex Native Oyster Restoration Initiative project. Oysters, I'm sure a lot of people are aware, are pretty common along the Essex coast, but you might not know that there's a big difference between native oysters and Pacific invasive oysters. So we want to learn a little bit more about native oysters particularly because they're the important ones here. So Matt, you maybe want to tell us a bit about their biology and why they're so important?
Yeah, sure. I guess firstly, the history of oysters here. Essex has a really rich history surrounding the native oyster. They've been cultivated here for hundreds of years, for thousands of years since the Romans were here. They're ingrained in our history. Communities built around cultivation of the native oyster. And then environmentally, in terms of their biology, they're fantastic for the environment. So native oysters are filter feeders, meaning by how they feed is taking in water, removing the food particles, and then releasing that water again. So they create cleaner water. A single native oyster, so just one of these is filtering 200 litres of water every single day. So you can imagine once you've got millions of oysters, it's a huge amount of water that they're cleaning up for us. Once you have native oysters, anywhere you find native oysters and native oyster beds, you find an increase in biodiversity. So other species love to live and feed around native oysters. The oysters create this sort of complex 3D matrix, much like a coral reef, where you've got this big structure that everything can live in, feed in, have shelter, and then having those small creatures, your crabs, your shrimps, that draws in all your bigger things like your fish, your bass, and so on.
Fantastic. And so what we're doing here is, we mentioned the Pacific oysters earlier, is that native oysters unfortunately have had a huge population decline over the last couple of hundred years particularly. Back in the 18th, 19th century, the London markets, there's something about 10 million oysters were sold annually at markets, so it's a really, really big kind of industry for oysters, and they were very prevalent, particularly here on the Essex coast. But the last couple of hundred years, the population has plummeted to around 95% less than what they were, which is obviously a huge figure and really worrying, especially when we know how important they were and are as a species.
But just to add, that's not just here in Essex, that decline is across the UK and actually globally as well. We've seen the same decline in oysters across the whole of Europe. The whole of the North Sea was once oyster beds, and just through over-exploitation, pollution, disease, we've unfortunately lost most of our native oysters.
It's a real shame. We have kind of one of the last strongholds, if you like, of the native oyster is here in Essex, and that's why we're conducting this project really. So Matt working for the Blue Marine Foundation, and ENOI, as I said, is the Essex Native Oyster Restoration Initiative. It's a bit of a tongue twister, try saying that quickly. So we're trying to restore the population of oysters effectively. And the last, I think it's 2011, was it founded around there?
Yep.
Yeah. So since then they've been trying to deploy more oysters. I mean, this is probably more for Matt to say.
Yeah, I can jump in. So we've been doing active restoration here in Essex. We've been working in the Blackwater, and we've got a special restoration box there where we're focusing our restoration efforts. So what we're doing is, when these oysters breed, they spawn and release a larvae into the water column. That floats around for sort of up to 2 weeks looking for hard substrate to settle on. So rock or ideally old shell. If you think of how oysters are eaten, it's in half a shell. That shell is then thrown away, goes to landfills and lost. So, as Alex said, you've had millions of oysters been eaten for hundreds of years. We've removed all of that shell, destroyed all of these lovely, pristine native oyster beds, and just left a bare, muddy seafloor. So what we've been doing is adding back in that stone and shell. We've done 3 or 4 years of active restoration work now, adding in hundreds of tons of this stone and shell to create this new oyster bed or oyster reef, and then adding these mature native oysters on top to reboost that breeding stock in that area.
That's really interesting and really important work. And I hope everybody has a real interest in it, because oysters, although maybe they don't look the most exciting of species compared to maybe like a dolphin or a whale or something, which everybody gets excited about, rightly so. But oysters are so important as a substrate, as a habitat, and can provide not only for us but for other species as well. So in terms of what we're doing here in Brightling Sea, is that we've got these cages, you might be able to see below us. We put in a few of these along this marina area here, which we used initially as an engagement tool, and we're still doing that. So we had a local school with a few classes come along a couple of months ago, and we showed them the oysters. They had a talk about oysters beforehand, so they learned about them and their importance, and then we showed them some of the animals that can live in this habitat. And that's also what we're doing in terms of monthly monitoring surveys. So each month, myself and a couple of other people come along, I will monitor these oyster cages to see what animals are kind of attached to them, basically. And so we lift these cages up using this trolley, put them in there, unload all the oysters, and go through to see if there's been any mortalities, what's living on there. And the oysters, they clean up really nicely. They might not look the most exciting, but got some really lovely colours and patterns. But it might be worth actually saying how they're different to the Pacific oysters, Matt.
Yeah, so another name for them as well as native oyster, they're called the European flat oyster. And this is that sort of flat shape you get. The Pacific oyster or rock oyster has a much more sort of wavy shell. That's the one that you'll more commonly see in restaurants. They're available year round and grown sort of through aquaculture, whereas native oysters have a season. So over the summer, so this sort of time of year, the oysters are spawning. So they're not eaten, they're left alone in peace to spawn, and then they'll open up again next month when you can eat native oysters again. But yeah, they're Pacific oysters as well, still fantastic filter feeders, but they're not a native species, and it's the native oyster that are really sort of in peril and that need our help to be restored.
Thank you. And yeah, just to go over some of the species that we've found so far on our surveys, we've had things like anemones, sea squirts, loads of shrimp and crabs. So you expect we've actually got a crab down here, if he lets me get him. And he doesn't pinch me. This little guy, probably not too happy to be here, but just to show you some of the animals which rely upon oysters as a habitat. He's smiling, you maybe can't quite tell, but I'm sure he's smiling at you. So yeah, we're doing that every month, these mortality surveys and these biodiversity surveys, also collecting really useful data on the oysters. And just also go on.
So the nurseries is something we've rolled out across the UK now. So it was pioneered by Blue Marine Foundation and a couple of our partners down in the Solent. I think we've now got 17 marinas that have got nurseries in down there. We've also set up hubs through the Wild Oyster Project in partnership with British Marine and ZSL in the northeast of England and Sunderland, and also in North Wales. So building this network of oyster nurseries around different marinas around the UK to try and increase this sort of breeding stock of oysters. The couple of hundred oysters that are here this time of year are all breeding, releasing that larvae that's flowing out of the marina here into the river and then wider into the surrounding area to then go out and settle and start repopulating. Here in Essex, as Alex said, we're really fortunate that we've got oysters still. It's one of the few places where there are still wild populations of oysters. Most of the other places we have these nurseries, we simply don't have those stocks of oysters anymore. So it's really that first vital stage of producing larvae and trying to resettle areas with native oysters. And as Alex said, they're a fantastic tool for engagement. We're able to bring people down, show them oysters, show them all the species that live in the cages and are associated with native oysters, and it's just a great learning experience for kids, but also for us. Every time you come down, there's something new to see, something new to experience. So yeah, they're a brilliant tool to help with restoration, but also engage with people and help people get in touch with something that's usually hidden beneath the ocean.
Absolutely, yeah. Just one final thing, just to show maybe demonstrate the importance of it. You can find videos online of oysters in tanks. So you've got, in one tank is just this really silty, sedimentary water, and then in the other tank you've got the same water but with oysters in, and over the space of a couple of hours, just that water becomes completely clean and filtered because of these oysters, whereas the other one remains silty. So it just shows you how effective they are and how important they are. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed our Marine in a Moment video for National Marine Week, and yeah, hope to see you on the next one.